All right. Hello and welcome to the live stream of the season 7 premiere of Data Driven. How's it going, Andy?
It's going well, Frank. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. So this is gonna we're so proud of season 7. We're splitting it into two parts, the premiere, right? So there's going to be this live stream recording that we're doing.
Yep.
And feel free to ask us questions if you're watching this live. And if you're not watching this live, feel free to ask us questions anyway. We have we're very proud, I think, of the fact, and I think rightly so, that we've made it to 7 seasons. It was 6 years ago this month that we launched. And if you go back in the history on Spotify or whatever podcast platform you listen to, or hey, man, just go to datadriven.tv, and you can kind of see how far we've come across 329 episodes, I think.
That just boggles my mind, Frank. It doesn't seem like that many.
It doesn't. And you know, there was good 5-6 years ago. 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was digging through the archives the other day. We're gonna split this up into two parts, right? So one where we can kind of do a live stream and be more off the cuff, but also kind of a pre-recorded one that we're going to go through some other stuff and things like that. We are going to pull off a technical feat of interviewing Bailey, our British semi-sentient AI MC and host, who I think is in some ways more popular than us.
I'd agree, yeah, and rightfully so.
That's right. Well, Iron Man had Tony Stark had Jarvis, Aperture Labs had GLaDOS, so she's kind of somewhere in the middle, I would say, of that.
Yeah, that's fair.
And was it Network 23 had Max Headroom? Is that the
right?
So she's kind of like a little bit of Max Headroom, a little bit of GLaDOS thrown in. Not the homicidal part,
no,
and helpful like Jarvis, so kind of somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And what a year it's been, but also what a 6 years it's been just in the technology field. Obviously, the show has kind of grown with it, but for both of us, I think this show has lasted longer than I think and done better than we thought, right?
Yes.
And that's a good sign. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
We really, I don't know. What were your thoughts? Because the origin story for those new, first off, if you're not already subscribed, feel free to subscribe. Data Driven podcast. We're on all the major platforms. And if you happen to find a platform that we're not on, please let us know. And Rupesh,
I was saluting Rupesh. I said, hello, Rupesh.
Put the channel in the overlay.
There we go. That'll help.
Awesome. Big shout out to Rupesh, who was the guest on the season 6 premiere, if I recall correctly. Now let's go crazy. That's right.
Yeah, we will try, Rupesh. But Frank, to answer your question, I think season 6 is. I think we're gonna look back on it as a pivot.
Yeah.
First, we may have done more episodes. I'll say it this way, more interviews. I think we did more interviews in season 6 than in any other. And we have definitely pivoted away from some of the stuff that we've tried. Not that we've given up on some of the other stuff that we've done. I think of the data points. I don't know that we did a data point in season 6.
No, we did. Well, kind of. I floated the idea of Bailey getting her own show, and I think there's buzzwords with Bailey, which we may develop into a show.
Yeah.
And this is really it's really kind of a thing. Like, and this has come up. I know you mentioned this in feedback, and we do listen to listener feedback. Some people love Bailey, and some people find her annoying, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think part of that is that as good as, and I don't want to derail this because we'll have a whole thing about Bailey maybe in part 2. As good as the AI generation is, it's still not perfect, right? So that's why I try to keep her to a paragraph of text, right?
Right.
And I've spoken to some folks about this, particularly with when she had her own show in the video, right? And yes, we will put an real AI voice to Bailey on this one. What's interesting is the after a while, she starts to sound like she's an AI generated, right?
Yeah.
And I was going through the archive last night and kind of like, found the exact episode where we switched over to her. Right?
Oh, cool.
Last one with the human was the last one with the human was Bob Ward's episode. So Bob Ward's kind of a big deal in the SQL Server world. So,
yes, he is.
And then was right after that we tried it out, and I was listening to it, and the voice we use today, we've changed the voice actually I think twice in the AI side of things because I'm using 2 different engines, and the first one I think had a more mature sound, but the current voice that we use for her is a lot closer to the original actress that we hired. Yep. So, and it's just a function of, I think, just the nuances of human voice and communication. Now, there are some things I've discovered recently where you can kind of put pauses, and same engine, actually. We're using Synthesia or Synthesis. Let's see, what is the name of the actual site? Synthesis I'm using to generate her today.
Okay.
And it's pretty close. I mean, one of the things that I think really keeps people out is the video version of her, because it does start to look fake after a while. And but that's someone said like, well, she kind of creeps me out because she looks kind of fake. But then she's like, well, she's supposed to be an AI, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it is a video synthesizer. So interesting enough is that the company I use, I got the deal on AppSumo, and I think I have an affiliate link for AppSumo, so we'll put that in the show notes. But or if you can't wait, you just can't wait, go to AppSumo. There's always good deals, particularly for content creators and kind of entrepreneur type folks. There's a lot of SaaS deals going on in that space, and I would highly recommend just perusing the catalog of stuff that they have, because they always have a good deal. And I got the Synthesia software for like a steal, like it was like a song, right? Nice. Now I don't think I would put the money into it.
Right.
That sounds terrible, right? It's a ringing endorsement. No, they have, and I used it for work too, right? Because one of the things I'm responsible for in my day job is content, field enablement, right? Creating content for the field to sell our product, Red Hat OpenShift Data Science, which totally check it out. Oh yeah, that's a good point. So Rupesh is awesome. We'll have Rupesh back on the show. Actually, he's like the next Steve Jobs. Anyway, long story short is her carrying her own show. I have mixed feelings about. Now we can create a separate feed, separate page for all of that. We could totally do that. Just let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more of that. And the interesting thing there is that think about how far AI has come in the last 6 years, right? Like when we were starting this, right? I got the first idea for this show. What year was that? It would have been 2016, right?
Yep.
And I got the idea for the name at a Dunkin' Donuts.
Quite a story.
On Black Friday, of all days, about 4 to 6 weeks after I had a major concussion, right? So I remember very vividly just repeating the name to myself for like 45 minutes till I got back home where I could write it down, which in retrospect, I probably should just wrote it on my phone, but it didn't have, I did not have the presence of mind at the time. And then I remember, I think I ruminated on about a week before I reached out to you.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So I had this whole thing. I was going to pitch you for it, but you said yes right away, much to my surprise and delight.
No, I thought it was a great idea. I like the name.
Mm-hmm.
And, did we know, did I know what we were getting into? And did I have any idea that, we would reach 300 some shows? No, absolutely not. But it was one of those, I don't know how to explain this without sounding weird, but sounding weird has never frightened me before. So here goes. I have this knack sometimes for hearing an idea or and it could be anything. Mostly it's like it shows up in coding. So, I'll see some feature or some new thing. And I remember the first time I noticed this, it happened with reflection in .NET. I learned about reflection and I thought, that is really cool, but I can't think of a single use case for it. Of course, we know now there's a bunch of use cases for reflection, but this was at least 20 years ago, I want to say, when it came out and I first saw it. So it's that knack. And yeah, I feel like I was right about that. And it's the same way with suggestions like this, Frank. It just right away, it resonates. And I can't do any better articulating how it feels other than that. And I could just go, yes. And I remember doing that. I was like, that is a great idea. Let's go do it.
You were way more enthusiastic than I expected, which is a good sign. It was a good sign. And we struggled. I mean, so I think it was so Black Friday is always the day after Thanksgiving here in the US. And then I think I approached you like a week later because I was kind of thinking things through in my mind, like, can I do this? Should I do this by myself? What, because I had been laid off, and because I was laid off in the middle of a career transition from kind of Windows Phone development. I can't say that. If I don't laugh when I say Windows Phone development, I'll cry. And here, just for the show, for those not watching the video, this is the very first Windows Phone that I had. Actually, it's not true. I had a prototype, but this is the first one I got from when I was a Sprint customer.
Yeah.
I don't even think Sprint is a separate company anymore. And you'll notice that it had a keyboard, the little Windows logo, a relic from a much simpler era. What was the thing Obi-Wan Kenobi said? A more civilized weapon for a more civilized time.
Exactly.
Something like that. And that's one of the things. So one of the things that's fascinated me, kind of just in the, one of the things that's fascinating me is kind of how podcasts grow and develop over time, right? So .NET Rocks was started by Carl Franklin. 2002, 2003? A long time ago, right? Yeah. Right when the term podcasting was first introduced, and there's a point to this. I'm
going to interrupt you to say morning to Stu.
Oh, okay, cool. Morning, Stu.
And he's talking about it. He's complaining or not complaining. He's commenting that we're doing TBS scheduling. And
TBS scheduling.
I like that. Yeah. It worked out okay for TBS, if I recall.
So I was going to say, my friend's got a nice house. We are. I think one of the things that's fascinating me is kind of the emergent stuff that happens, right? So if you look at, like, I remember listening to Carl Franklin's the .NET Rock Show religiously for probably the better part of 10 years.
Yeah.
And like certain segments would appear, and just certain patterns of the show would emerge over time, and that always fascinated me. And I intentionally kind of did not want to artificially create segments, right? We obviously started with, so the format and structure of this show, this is actually my second podcast ever. I had a podcast called Frankie's Friday Flashback in the 2005 timeframe. It lasted all of 3, maybe 4 episodes. And that was my big concern here. So I was like, I want to, in the podcasting world, they call that pod fade, right? Where you produce all these shows and then you stop over time, it fades out.
Gotcha.
So that was my thing. So I think you and I had committed to 3 years, even if nobody listens.
Yeah.
We're just going to do it and then reevaluate in 3 years. And hold on to that thought, because we'll revisit that in a minute. That worked out well, because when you launch a show, this is particularly painful for me personally with YouTube, right? Like, I've been on YouTube now for maybe 10 years. I still have 400 subscribers to my page, to my channel, right? And I had grand visions when I started it that I would be like, hundreds of thousands of subscribers. That never happened. At least
I don't think I have that many. I think mine may be in 2 digits. I'm going to go look. Now you're going to make me look.
Now I'm going to make you look.
Yeah.
But because I started that, I think I started that like 2012, I would say, maybe. And I started with the wrong intention. And the wrong intention was go for the numbers, right? Rather than for the passion. And I think that's partly why it failed. It also failed because my manager at a large tech company based in Seattle suburb was not on board with it. And that's all I'll say. To the point where he was yelling at me at the Phoenix airport that I was wasting my time on that, and I should get a student to do all the video work for me. And it's comical because, and then again, I kind of clap back at him like, we live in Washington, D.C., right? This is not New York or Los Angeles. There's not a broke film student on every street corner. You know what I mean? Like, I can't just find somebody and give them a bag of Doritos and, and hope that they'll do video editing. Plus, there's a longer story there, but I'm going to leave that.
Yeah.
But the idea is that I didn't do that. So when I consciously thought about this, for even before I think I spoke to you, like what's the goal here, right?
Yeah.
And I think you and I were on the same page. Let's just do it for 3 years, see what happens. Here we are, 6 years later, and we're still doing it. And what fascinates me is the pattern, the pattern of that emerges, right? Like the movie quotes. Like each show, almost every show has a movie quote. For a while, every show had a quote from The Expanse or some kind of reference to The Expanse.
Well, we're Expanse fans. That's
big Expanse fans. And we've done a lot of things that it just kind of happened, right? And the format of the show, in case you're wondering, comes straight from John Lee Dumas, who we actually did have a guest on the show. And John Lee Dumas has a show called Entrepreneurs on Fire. He would do it every day. So he has like 2,000-3,000 episodes, like some ridiculous amount of episodes. But like he would have kind of a free form conversation in the first part, and then kind of canned questions in what he calls the lightning round. And that's kind of where I got the idea. And I took his course, which is totally awesome, by the way. Just do a search for on your favorite search engine, John Lee Dumas, free podcasting course. But it kind of gives the show form, because every once in a while you will have a guest that is just mic shy, right? And it helps kind of frame the conversation, right? And this really only happened like a handful of times. Like that has really been the edge case.
It has, and we've done a fair job. I'm thinking of the last time I recall it happening, or maybe it wasn't the last time, but you're right. I can think of maybe 4 or 5 out of 300.
It was like season 4. I mean, it was a long
and we had to, the person we were interviewing just was giving us single word answers, monosyllables. And it took a while. It didn't stay that way, but 5-10 minutes in.
Well, I mean, and that's kind of the elephant in the room. Like, this is not a field that attracts extroverts.
No.
To the same degree, say, real estate agents or car salesmen.
Exactly.
Do.
And it turned out fine. I mean, but there for a while, I hope I wasn't, sharing my non-poker face about it, but I was going, You know, this guy going to talk or what?
I think that's before we did video, actually.
Yeah, it was. Thankfully, yes, that's right. You couldn't see my poker face back when we were doing audio, and that's one of the things that happened. We grabbed. I say we. Frank grabbed the domain datadriven.tv, and we were planning on doing similar to what we're doing right now on May. It's May 11th. Yeah, 2023. We were planning on doing video, and we struggled with that. All right, how are we going to do this? And remember, it's 2017, um, and it's not that long ago. But when you consider how far our streaming has come in the last 6 years, it was like the old days. And I think Frank credits me with doing it. I don't remember saying this, but we got to a spot where we were like, let's just launch. We can do audio.
No, it was you. It was you. We were, because I was, so we take for granted now streaming, right? You can stream on your phone, right? You can do this. So when my last job at Microsoft the last job of the first stint at Microsoft was I was actually on K Street, working with kind of the lobbyists and things like that, doing what we called civic tech. And we actually have an interview lined up with someone who does something very similar to civic tech, and we kind of revisit that world. And he turns out he's a longtime listener, which was kind of cool to actually. That was kind of cool.
That's happened more and more. Yeah, this season, definitely the season 6 stuff, and we've got a bunch of shows in the can for season 7 already. The interviews are done, and we've heard that every third or fourth,
something like that. We got like 9 shows, I think, in the can. For season 7 already,
and they start telling us things. Yeah, this was my favorite part. You did this. Remember when you talked about? And we're like, yeah, but it's
we did do that.
somebody remembered, and listened to it. I guess it shouldn't be weird, but
no, it's kind of cool, and
it is very cool.
I actually had a guest. So sometimes our production flow gets disrupted, right? Like so if it follows kind of the normal path, and this is something we're trying to get better. And Rupesh, there's always a spot for you in season 7, man. Hit me up.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's set that up.
Demo. We have one show that's still in the vault that we've not released, and that's from like season 2. It's an oldie. Right. And it was basically somebody who worked at AWS required that we run it through their PR department. Right. And our production kind of system, it's not robust to change. It's not bad, but it's not robust to change. Right. And because it's actually kind of funny because we've seen a lot. We've had the most number of shows this season. Right. I think 27 or 28, 29, like thereabouts. And they've been proper shows. I say proper shows, right? In that they're not a lot of data points. Now, part of that is that the original infrastructure for the data points, which were kind of like the little tiny shows that we did, has been, and yes, video production hell is a mess. Audio, I would say audio production is not so much hell as it is purgatory, right? Because it's not quite hell. It's not really a great place, but it's not quite hell. One of the biggest challenges actually with video production is when you cut something, right? And like say I'm talking, right? I'm like, hey, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to cut off that blah, blah, blah. You'll see my head switch, right? Now, one of the things you've learned, and I've created a lot of training videos internally at Red Hat, and is you just put B-roll in front of it, right? So you can kind of hide the cuts, right? And you'll see a lot of YouTubers what they'll do is they'll zoom in, right? So it looks like the cut is to bring awareness to something that they're saying, and sometimes that's true, but they kind of hide the cuts. One thing I've noticed is that once you study kind of video production, and not like I'm Martin Scorsese or whatever, right? Like, but like when I did have my midlife crisis, and you're getting old when your midlife crisis was almost a decade ago, right? I had this idea that I was kind of burnt out on tech, and this is when I worked at a large technology company based in the suburbs of Seattle. The first time I worked at said company, right around the time I was yelled at the Phoenix airport for wanting to do YouTube, basically. I had this idea I was going to become a documentary filmmaker. I had this kind of this crazy idea. So I guess it was kind of, I didn't have your typical midlife crisis. I did buy a car, right? I bought a 1976 Eldorado convertible. I think Andy remembers pictures of that.
Yes.
It was awesome.
Nice
And
boat.
then I had this idea I become a thing. So I studied filmmaking. I took some courses on it. I read some books on it. So it's an interesting thing because once you do that, you can't really watch movies or TVs quite the same way. You know what I mean? Like I know that, I think we were critiquing the Lord of the Rings series on Amazon, right? And like, the storytelling mechanisms that they used, they layered a bunch of them together that
Right.
really confused the audience, which they shouldn't have done.
It was
And
too much.
It was too much, right? So it was kind of like you're kind of in that quarter life crisis. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But you're doing all right for yourself, man.
You're doing well.
Um, that's actually a thing where they talk about the quarter life crisis, and I think that's a real thing too, right? Because once you get out of school or you're in your 20s, you kind of figure out what am I going to do with my life, right?
Happened to me.
Yeah, it happened to me too. But it's what makes us stronger.
It does.
Again, I got derailed, which is another emergent pattern of the show, right? Like we do get derailed, but that's kind of the fun stuff. Sometimes we get into fun stuff, and sometimes we get distracted. It's not all episodes are kind of like 9, 10s, but we've had a few recorded lately, but towards the end of season 6 and 7, where we're getting like 10s and 11s, right? Like it's impressive. I think part of that is our interviewing skills have gotten better.
I agree.
Because if you go back even to like the Joe Rogan show, you listen to like the first few shows, it's not the same polish and professionalism that you get today.
Right.
I know a lot of people would say that there's no polish and professionalism on his show even today, but he's kind of like this generation's Howard Stern. You love him or you hate him, right? There's no middle ground. And there are probably kids out there today that don't even know who Howard Stern is, which is kind of, again, makes me feel old. But look him up online. Just not on a
work don't. Right, or don't.
Not on a work computer. But I mean, there's. I honestly don't know where I was going, which I think is a very meta moment, isn't it? Like talking about getting sidetracked and losing track. Derailed. Oh, I love that, Stu. Stu says, derailed. I prefer off-road journeys anyway. Thank you.
We do too, Stu. And speaking of guests who are welcome anytime, you are as well.
So I got a good story about the Stu episode.
Yeah.
So I was actually in. We had a Red Hat kind of sales kickoff event, and it was in Dallas during they had the big snowstorm, right? Which basically crippled the city. So I ended up getting out there on one of the few flights to get out of DC, and I made it there. And I'm at dinner, and this one guy was like, I guess we'd done the live stream with Stu. So Stu had been laid off from Salesforce, I believe, and during all the tech layoffs. And this was literally like the day after Microsoft had their big layoffs, and they had their private Sting concert in Davos. Now I know that the left. I know from personal experience that company sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Right, that's a thing. Somebody was like, wow, that was really like an impressive interview, blah, 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 blah. Like, he's like, how did you plan that? I love the show. Like, and it was just like, we really didn't plan that at all. It was kind of just, I think I messaged you and I was like, hey, we haven't done a live stream in a while. Let's do a live stream and let's talk about kind of this layoff thing. And, it's always good when I can kind of like point out some hypocrisy at certain organizations. Let's just put it that way. And then, when we were talking like, hey, if you, and then I think Stu came on and said, I was laid off because we were offering kind of like a platform. If you've been laid off, come on a live stream. We'll talk about you. We'll share about you. We are professionals. And we had Stu come on just kind of on the hook. And I think he had a Commodore 64 shirt. And it was a great show. And like people were like, wow, how'd you do that? And like for us now, because we're like 300-400 shows into this, plus Um, oh, you don't know the Howard thing? I'll
It's
explain.
it's a U.S. thing,
US thing.
Rupesh. Sorry.
And it was I mean, it was just one of those things where it worked out really well. It was a good show. It was ad hoc. We
It
really
did.
don't script any of this, right? In fact, to the point where as I'm doing more training content internally at Red Hat, my manager, who's an awesome manager, and I'm not just saying that because he's could be listening, he's like, no, you got to write a script, right? Because he wanted me to. I had to do a demo for important people. That's all I'll say, and I had ad hoc it, right? Like I always do, right? I just don't typically work off of the script. So he's like, no, you got to work off a script. So I've been kind of getting better at that. And the latest round of training videos I've done internally where I have a script, I do kind of like with the Grant Cardone when he reads his own audiobook, right? He'll read from the book, but then he'll pause in the middle of it. Jordan Belfort does this too, actually, in a lot of his stuff. He'll be like, all right, so this is what I meant. Like, so I kind of do that. And it kind of gives you this hybrid thing that depending on your audience, I think that works really well. But reading from a script and not looking or acting like you're reading from a script is very hard.
Right. We had Kevin Hart too. I want to mention Kevin Hart.
Oh my God, Kevin Hart's
one.
Awesome.
He's so funny and really just so off the cuff. But he was, and in the middle of the audiobook, he was fussing at the studio people, the engineers and such, he was blaming them for knocking him off script. He's got this book he wrote. It's all their fault because he keeps going off. And it's a not safe for work, another not safe for work type thing.
Totally not. Yeah.
But and I wouldn't listen to it out loud in the car with my kids in the car. Although it wouldn't be anything. The youngest is about to turn 16, so not only have they heard that language before, they probably used it.
Unfortunately, so with our first child, we were far more conscious of what we say. The second one, not as much.
That's a trend, Frank. We had our first son. He would trip on the playground, and we'd run over and see, "Are you okay? Are you hurt? Are you bleeding?" And our second one, this short story. Sorry for interrupting. Another rabbit trail. We're sitting across the park, and he's on this. The younger one is on this whirly thing, and so the older one is actually trying to see how fast he can make it go, and the younger one, it goes too fast for him. He lets go, and we see him sail maybe 8 feet and land, and he lands on his gut in the sand, face down, and my beautiful bride Christy, she yells over at him, "Are you bleeding?" And he lifts his head, goes, "No." And she says, "Get up." And we thought about, how different.
It is true. Like, in the first child, you're like, oh my God, like he hit it, call the pediatrician, call this. Yes. And I used to be an EMT. I think that came out because at one point we interviewed each other. We asked each other the questions because that was a listener request. Like, hey, you never asked that. So, the EMT would come out. Now, like when the second one comes, it's like, stand up, turn left, turn right. You're fine.
Right. It's just, I think you're just used to it. So there's no way to, there's no manual for becoming a parent.
No.
And that first time it's, you're working with the beta child. So anyway, they've survived, up to, like I said,
kids are a lot more resilient than I think we give them credit for. And
true.
It's just, very true. I don't know, like we are going to do like the questions again, probably in part 2 of the season premiere,
Right.
But again, we got sidetracked. That's kind of cool, right? Because this is something that actually, so one of the questions has come up. Now I know where I was going with this, with the language, is that a lot of people are like, hey, why are you, when you always make a point like, hey, we have a clean iTunes rating or whatever. The reason for that is I'm a parent, right?
Yeah.
I know there are other parents who like to listen to podcasts while they're driving their kids around, and the language, like, I listened to Joe, what's his name?
Joe Rogan. Yeah.
Joe, what's his name? And I can't listen to him when the kids are in the car, right? And for
Right.
reasons that I can't get into now, we spend a lot of time seeing my wife's family up in Pennsylvania, right? Which is a like 2.5 hour round trip, right? Which would, about the length of a Joe Rogan podcast. It would be perfect.
Right.
However, if I have the kids in the car, I can't, right?
Right.
Again, not in the cosmic scheme of things, not a big problem. But I will use the E word, Andy. I will use the word empathy. Right?
Empathy. Yes.
I have empathy for other parents who may be taking long car trips or have the kids in the car, and I just, that's the theme of season 7. Sidetrack.
I just like
Yes,
that.
we should weaponize it, right? Like, we should just own it, right?
That's
The feedback is more, if you are the donkey first in the lot. Rupesh is on fire, man. If he could be a good stand-up. He's like kind of like a cross between Kevin Hart and Steve Jobs. That's kind of the vibe I get. He's awesome, by the way. He got company Pixie. He does a lot of stuff. You should definitely hit him up on LinkedIn and your socials.
Yep.
But no, that's why. Like, it's not because, trust me, if you've heard some of the conversations in the virtual green room where Andy and I, or just anywhere else Andy and I talk, that the language thing is completely like different, right? Like, so, and also like there's something to be said for kind of professional decorum, right?
I agree.
But the main driver is actually, because one of the things we go through when you create a podcast, and if you're thinking about creating a podcast, reach out and maybe we can help. But there's a lot of things you think about, and one of the things you think about is kind of who your listener is, right?
Right.
And that was kind of the thing. It's like, well, if they want to listen to with their kids around, or they're playing it on, their Bluetooth speaker while they're cooking dinner, or cleaning up, emptying a dishwasher or whatever. Like, you just don't want language to be a thing.
Right. And to be fair, a lot of the media outlets, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, they will ask, because in some locations around the globe, there are different regulations in place that you have to basically let them know if you're going to be if you're targeting an audience of 18 or older. I think YouTube, the big thing is, are you safe for kids? And it's ironic that if you check that box, it's actually bad for you. So it's weird. We are safe for kids, but we didn't label our channel as that because it makes you do. I forget what all it is. What it makes.
I think it's COPA. I think there's some legislation in the U.S. where
it's
under 13, if you appeal to that. And if you're like, there's some weird guy who wears this weird, like, that sounds bad, but there's a guy, I think his name is Blippy or Bippy, where he makes videos for little kids. Yeah. And like, he's kind of like this generation's Barney, right? And so he's kind of almost that level of annoying. But his business is like for kids, so they have like YouTube Kids and stuff like that. And legislation, I think, has a lot to do with it. But that's why we don't market. I mean, it's really just about the explicit language, right? Like,
I think that's the big thing. But there's so many other considerations these days with, and I'll say this: I believe all of the regulations. Well, I'll say it. I believe most of the regulations have the best of intentions, and they're trying to do a good thing. Often I see some workaround, and not a positive workaround, where people, kind of skirt the intent of the regulation, and they do something harmful. And it's just, I think it's just the nature of regulation.
That's called the lobbying industry.
Is that what that is, Frank?
You
worked with lobbyists, so
one of these days I'm going to write a book about.
There you go.
A tell-all book about that. Which, speaking of books, I'm actually about to close a deal on a book about using ChatGPT in your role as a data scientist. And I'll have more to say about that once the contract is signed, but the outline is done. It's been approved by the publisher. I'm intending to use the same publisher I did for my Silverlight book.
Nice.
So this would be, I always assume incompetence rather than evil intent.
Stuart, I think that's a great a great way to look at it. When it, yes, I don't think people set out like they wake up in the morning and go, "How can I, mess
Right.
up?"
There
They're
are
trying to
those
help.
actors in the world, but the road to hell
Yeah,
is paved with good intentions, right? That's
true.
probably one of the most wisest things I've ever heard.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, so it's the same. So actually, this will be my third book because I do count my Cubit Before Christmas short story
As you should.
as a published work, and that was self-published, and it's available in the Kindle store, by the way. Just saying. Um, and then we have so that'll be out tentatively, I think, for December. Gonna see if I can
Excellent.
like make it faster, but
I keep trying to rewrite a couple of books. I want to revise.
I'm not in Andy territory. You're like in 12, 13, 14 books.
Yeah, but it's just insomnia, Frank. That's the deal. But the
Weaponized insomnia.
that's it.
It's not
I
just
keep,
insomnia. There's plenty of
I've got it.
insomniacs in the world that have never written a book.
That's
That they
right.
watch like infomercials and keeping up with the Kardashians or whatever.
I remember when the almost 16-year-old was a baby. I was working on two projects at the same time, which I haven't done since. I learned that lesson. But I'd be holding a bottle and have him cradled in one hand and holding a baby bottle so my wife could get some sleep, and typing with the other hand on the laptop, doing that. But yeah, a couple of them need revision, and I've had ideas about combining two into one kind of overarching second edition. I just don't have time, and I know I say that. I get people ask me all the time. This happened this week. Someone said, "How do you have time to do all of these things?" We were talking about it, and I was like, my standard go to response is, "How much television do you watch?"
Right.
you know,
Well, it's funny, right? So it's funny, right? So this actually came up. Like one of the best jobs I had at Microsoft, and arguably maybe anywhere else except for my current one, was I was the data and AI architect at the Microsoft Technology Center in Reston.
Yeah, that was a
And
cool gig.
that was really a solid organization
Yeah,
because they really prepared you for the job. Like you got specialized training on how to do this, and certain types of things, and it's really helped me in my current job. It's helped me in a lot of ways. Like
well, it was very
um,
customer facing.
it
I
was
mean,
very customer facing, very intense. They
yes,
fancied themselves as the Navy SEALs of like field sales, and I would say that's pretty on point, right? I mean,
yeah, I agree.
the extra training you got, the continuous training, and when I took the job, and I think this that's the great thing about these little like off-road things. Like you can always come back, right? They all kind of come together, right?
Yeah,
It is a deep philosophical belief of mine that order is an emergent property of chaos.
and
And
that
I
and that sorts well with your stoicism, Frank. It,
This is
it
true.
just does. Yeah,
So and again I lost the train of thought. No, like the one of the things was they issued the job as, hey, we need a data scientist, right? We need somebody who's skilled in AI, right? And what they really needed was somebody who was a data engineer, right? Like they really needed two
yeah,
roles, right?
yeah.
Um, or one and a half. So one of the things was, um, and yes, Rupesh, Andy is in a league of his own.
Andy just
He's like the
likes to
Stephen
write.
King of technology books.
No, that's so true story. I'm going to derail us once more, but people ask, I've had people criticize me who have written one or more books, and they come to me and go, "This, if you do the math, it pays less than minimum wage. Why do you do it?" And the reason that I do it is because I like to write. I I didn't like to write until I was, older, 15, 20 years ago, but I do. I really enjoy writing. I find it very cathartic. The other side of that, though, is the year my first book came out, and it was a collaboration. There were 10 of us. My salary tripled. So I don't think those are disconnected. And so, but, if you, I tell anybody, try it and see. If it works for you, great. If it, and if it doesn't, then stop. That's kind of my advice for ever. Same for podcasting. A lot of people start a podcast. Frank did this one. Started a podcast, did a handful of episodes, and then it just fell off the radar for whatever reason. Just more important priorities came in. So, and I like to podcast, and I'm very fortunate that I get to work with Frank doing it. Frank and I have been friends for, doing the math, 17 and a half years.
Yeah, 2000.
Late 2005. Yeah.
Right. You showed up.
.NET user group.
That's right.
And yeah, it was crazy.
I remember that night because we had our normal place couldn't host us. And we were kind of jammed into 2 conference rooms at the place I worked at. And we had a friend of mine from New Jersey come down to speak, Miguel Castro.
Yeah.
And
that was a phenomenal presentation.
He's an awesome presenter. I haven't heard much from him of late, but I should reach out to him actually. So Miguel, if you're listening, Hear Me Out sponsorship opportunity, data-driven ATVs. I like the sound of that. My youngest is he's trying to hit us up, my wife and I, up for an ATV because we now live kind of near a Tractor Supply Company. We kind of moved out towards a more rural area, a more rural county in Maryland, and yes, they do exist. He's trying to hit us up. Well, can I get an ATV for my birthday? And we're like, no. He's like, well, when I turn 10, can I get an ATV? Like he's a real, as we would say in New York, a real mocker, like a real deal maker. And one of the side benefits of growing up in a place like New York is a lot of words that, and not just the general word that one thinks of when they think of New York people talking. Starts, let's just say, starts with the same letter as Frank and ends with the same letter as Frank, but it's not Frank. You're exposed to obviously a lot of Spanish words. You're exposed to a lot of Italian words and Yiddish, right? And there's just sometimes like I'll be like, I have to be careful because some of these words could be offensive, so we're not holding a thing. But I'll say like he's a real mocker. That's not offensive. That comes from it means doer in German and Yiddish, right? So he's a real maker, a real doer. Right. And like I'll drop that. My wife's from like the Pittsburgh area, and she has no idea what I'm talking about.
I like it, Stu.
For all your derailed sidetrack.
I get it. I didn't make that connection. But I
totally
like the data-driven ATVs. We could. So if you're going to get one for one of your children, one word of advice: governors.
Oh yeah. He has an electric scooter now, which has an electronic governor, and he always convinces us. He always sweet talks us into us removing the limit. So the thing goes like 20 miles an hour. Like it's kind of scary.
Yeah. I mean that's fast enough. I mean here I am that. I won't tell you about my dirt bike youth. All right, I'll tell you this part. When I first got the bike, I didn't know how to work on it. And the brakes didn't work. The rear brakes didn't work. The front brake did, which is a recipe for going over the handlebars. Ask me how I know. And then I got very good at laying the bike down and then flipping my leg on the dirt side up over it, literally riding the bike as the inertia slowed it down. And then one more story. I broke my leg playing basketball when I was 16. The summer I was going to turn 16, I was 15. And a few weeks later, I carry the little walker foot thing that the doctor had put on the bottom of the cast. I'm bringing that back to the doc, and he says, "So how did this come off?" And I said, "Well, I'm riding down through the road, on my motorcycle, riding through the woods, and there's a stump about that high, and it clears my foot peg, but this thing's hanging beneath it, and so it knocks it off." And as I'm telling this to our doctor, he is getting redder and redder in the face, and he yelled words that we won't repeat, being professional and keeping our clean rating, at me, and threatened me with traction for the remainder of the summer.
Oh,
he was right. I mean, I was stupid multiple times.
So. That's it. I had this conversation with my oldest now that he's a teenager more than once, and I'm like, I was once 13 too, right? You know that, right? Like, I'm not
No,
stupid.
you were born like 24, Frank, and
Well, I
then
mean, that's the thing. Like, you don't realize that your parents were regular human beings, right? Until
yes,
you become parents, really. I mean, like I remember when my oldest was born, I was just like, first, you're worried all the time, and I turned to my
yeah.
mom and said, "Does this ever stop? Like this constant like nagging worry?" She goes, "How long does it last?" She goes, "How old are you?" And I was like,
At least that long.
"Touche, mom, touche. God rest her soul." But yeah, I mean, I think I enjoy writing too, right? Like
Yeah,
it's very cathartic. It helps you organize your thoughts, as you can tell, right? Not all of my thoughts are always organized. They're kind of, it's kind of like Grand Central Station in here, right? There's a lot of activity, a lot of coming, a lot of going. You know, writing kind of helps me center myself and kind of focus my thoughts.
right.
Um, and I, the origin story of Data Driven has to do with the concussion I got, and this was actually kind of that concussion was. I look back at the time; was an awful thing to happen, right? Because there were a lot of
Yeah,
bad things going on in my life at the time, including and not limited to being laid off, and my mom being in the hospital, but
yeah.
and the cat dying. Like it was like a country song, Andy.
It was,
I
and
didn't have a pickup truck, so the universe
you
couldn't knock me
you
on
didn't.
breaking the truck down.
But you think about it, you were like Doc Brown. You hit your head.
Yeah,
You
yeah, it
woke
was a
up
lot like
with
that. It was like,
vision of the flux capacitor.
well, it wasn't quite like that, but yeah, I mean, it was like, the one thing that a couple of things kind of came out of that. One, I kind of uh, had a chance to kind of just think and be still, right? Which we
Yes.
don't get to do in our modern world, right?
Yeah.
And two, one of the things the doctor said, because they were doing all sorts of cognitive tests and things like that, and my wife had made a I'll assume she was joking about ADD, right? About me possibly having ADD, and then and the doctor just like, well, it's possible, but by this point in your life, you've come up with coping mechanisms to
Exactly.
work around it,
Right.
and I don't know, like that kind of phrase stuck. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Um, that phrase stuck, coping mechanisms for it, right? So it was
Yep.
kind of, I spent the next, few weeks. It felt like I had to like put together my brain again. Like it just, the best way to describe it was when you try to think, it was like you were trying to start an engine, but the engine wouldn't turn. Like it would just
Yeah.
like, obviously, if you're fortunate enough to have a Tesla, you have no idea what I'm talking about, right? But like if you turn the key, I don't even have any cars that have the turn key, but like you would turn it, and it would just sound like it would go,
Right.
right? It would be kind of like that, and that's the only way I could describe what it was like to think like that. And that's a very scary place to be, where you're kind
I
of like,
remember. Yeah, I remember because we've been talking since we became
right.
friends, and it was it was obvious that you were struggling, and I remember praying maybe more for you during that time than ever, but because it was weeks, it was
It
weeks
was,
that
it
you went
happened.
through that.
Um, I had to do some research for something, and we'll demonstrate that in a minute. I have the screen share ready to go, which is one of the big announcements for this particular part 1 of season 7 premiere.
Trying
Um,
to do a drum roll.
is Yeah, I was like, when did that happen? Like, when exactly did that happen? Because I remember the day I was like laid off. It was like my mom calls me, and God bless my mom, but my mom would always over worry on small things, but brush off the big things,
Right.
right? So to put it in perspective, you know, my mom will freak out that there's a snowstorm might possibly come towards like 3 days from now, and she'd be like, all like, oh my God, I get it, bread, milk, like just completely like prepared to be like shuttered in for weeks, right? Just on the hint of a snowstorm. But when a real crisis happens, my mom is very calm, right? And when my mom is calm, I've learned growing up, something has gone horribly wrong, right? So 9/11 happened, right? Like at the time I lived down by the Trade Center. I was headed to Building 4 that morning. Was late, so I'm still here. My mom just leaves me a calm voicemail, right? Like, hey, Frankie, because she called me Frankie. Hey, Frankie, I was just calling to make sure you were okay. Call me back when you get this message. Love you. Bye.
Right.
Like that. So when my dad had a stroke, which ultimately led to his death, she called me, and I picked up the phone. She goes, "Hey, I think your dad's having a stroke. I think we should get him to the hospital."
Wow.
And then my now wife, I turned to her. I was like, "Yeah, I got to get up there. Like something's bad happened." But she sounded calm. Like, no, you don't understand.
Right.
When she's calm,
Right.
like that's the time to batten down the hatches. I don't really remember where I was going with this, but again, another sidetrack. We're kind of common, I think. Oh yeah, so when I was so I remember when my mom, it was around Labor Day 2016, and my mom was like, "Hey, I think I have to go to the hospital," right? And then I'm like, "Oh my god!" Like, and then like the I go up there. On the way up there, I somehow managed to break my thumb.
Goodness.
Right. And then I come back, and then that Monday I was told like, hey, your job, you're getting laid off. And then like the cat died. And then right after the cat died, I don't remember the exact date, but I do now because I did research for an article, which, hey, Frank, what are you writing this article for? Stick with me. So I managed to dig through the emails where I mentioned like I had a bunch of things I had to cancel because I was one of the things that they did give me was like career counseling. So I had this meeting with a career counselor, and there was no way in heck I could drive at that point. Like it was that bad.
Yeah.
So I found roughly the date that it happened. But what are you writing this article for, Frank?
What are you writing this article for, Frank?
Dun dun dun. So it is with great. You're doing the drum roll because I don't have the water thing installed. We are launching a magazine. Let's see if I can do this side by side because the aspect ratio. All right, well that works. For those of you listening and not doing this, we are launching a magazine. This is the screenshot of it. It will be available in print and digital. I will give you a quick preview here. And Rupesh, if you're still on, if you wanted to have anything in there like ad space or like write anything, now's the time because we're going to launch it next week. We have a number of articles in here.
Thank you, Stu.
Yeah, Stu, if you want to write, just let us know. One of the things I have to add is is like a hey, how do you reach us and that sort of thing. But you'll see that one of the things that we're announcing is that Bailey, since her voice and her visuals have kind of this unsettling, uncanny valley effect, she is going to be the world's first synthetic editor-in-chief. So we're having her do a lot of this work, and AI is infused throughout this entire thing, right? So this is kind of our artificial creativity section, whether it's art, poetry, and this picture here of the original Dunkin' Donuts. This is the one in Gaithersburg, Maryland. Had people in it. So I actually used AI, both Photoshop and DALL-E, to do smart erase. So in order to avoid any drama around PII and stuff like that, and just to try it out, there was a car here. The car is gone, and there was a person standing there like ruining the shot. And I don't live near this anymore, so I wasn't going to drive down. And I love the show, but
it was a bit of a drive.
Well, and last year when I was taking the kids to their old school, I made the drive twice a day, and it was just not. It's close enough that it's possible, far enough that it's annoying.
Right.
So this is actually a cleaned up image from that, right? So we used AI in creative ways and things like that. You'll notice QR codes because we want to make this kind of interactive. We are planning on doing this quarterly. Here's an ad for our merch shop. You can buy stuff. I called the final article Null Terminator, right? Because, and I even ended it with, 0x00. We're going to do a lot of fun stuff with this. And I think that kind of underscores a lot of the creative direction that we're taking with the show and kind of, going beyond podcasting. And, we're going to do this for a set period of time, probably 2 years, 3 years. It's going to be quarterly. Let's say 3 years, right? Quarterly, it's 12 issues, right? We like to write anyway. We're weird like that. So it's not really, obviously if folks want to write for us, let us know. We can't pay you just yet. But we're happy to take any guest contributions. Eventually we will get to the point where, we'll be able to pay for it. This will go live on our on MagCloud. We'll make sure that the links are included. So by the time you're listening to this in the podcast feed, it'll be in the show notes. This is a magazine, something I want to do for a while, actually. When I wrote my first book on Silverlight, I wanted to write a book on kind of XAML development. And at the time, it was there was a lot of other things going on in my life. My firstborn had just been born, so it just didn't happen. I kind of floated the idea a few years back, and it was kind of like, a magazine, really? Why, right? And I'm not picking on you, Andy, because you were the one.
No, Frank. I was going to say Frank's quoting me because I did not have the same reaction that I had for the podcast, and I'll fess up.
Well, it wasn't just you, right? It wasn't just you, right? It's not. I'm not picking on Andy, but it wasn't just you that had that reaction.
I'm picking on me, though. I'm calling me out on.
You're calling yourself out. That's what
I was wrong about it, and it took me a couple of years, more than a couple of years, to really. But
I also think though that there's no more MSDN magazine anymore.
That's
right?
true. Yeah.
And that decision was made way above my pay grade when I was at Microsoft. And I disagreed with it. They just decommissioned Channel 9, which was a huge mistake too. But that's a rant for another day and not a sidetrack I'm comfortable going on right now because I'm not shy to name names or freaky looking mascots. So many rabbit holes, Andy. So I got to get that ATV now. Just slap a data-driven sticker on it.
I can feel it. Yeah, the ATV is a great idea.
They have ATV races, don't they? Like we could sponsor a team once we get enough money.
So I think so. I don't know, but
I know they do road rally races, which is to me are the most fascinating types of races to watch. Because holy crap, you can drive in that? Like it's kind of one of the few video games I still play is actually it's like Dirt Road or something like that, or Dirt Fish or something like that. Like I don't play it that much. Obviously, if I did, I'd know the name, but I remember like getting it, downloading it, like this is fun. I think I saw it in a Micro Center. They had like a whole thing set up and
nice.
Nice. I think that the absence of MSDN magazine, right? MSDN magazine was special in a lot of ways, right? Obviously, not just. Stu with the link. Apparently, it is a thing. ATV racing.
I am clicking the link, Stu.
Cool, man. Save that link for me because I'm afraid what'll happen if I click on that. Will it mess up the stream? Again, we're coming towards kind of the end of the time I have. But plus, you drink a lot of water. I drink a lot of energy drinks. Our bladders, but can only do but so much. But you
made me laugh, Frank.
The absence of the MSDN magazine. Like MSDN magazine was special in a lot of ways. One, it was a very technical journal with a very niche kind of thing, right? Like I would always pick it up and I would always learn one thing guaranteed, usually like 3 or 4, right? Yep. And I had a special place in my heart because I did the tech editing for Rachel Appel's article, which was on Windows development. I took over her column, and then I switched it from kind of Windows development over to data science. And it was a lot of fun to write that article, right? And I was able to put in kind of like when I did one of the articles was about geolocation, I put in, I said it in the old neighborhood I used to live in. I mentioned I managed to get a screen cap of like pizza place I used to live in, that sort of thing. There's a very long comment here in a language I don't read.
Right.
So I will use Google Translate later. So thank you, Rakesh. Hello to you. And because it's in a language I don't read, it could be spam. I don't know.
Possible.
But anyway, like there was just stuff in there that I would always learn something. I always, whether it was writing C#, reflection code, right, or remoting code, or design patterns in Entity Framework 6, 7, whatever it is now, right? You would always learn something, and the way it was written, the way it came across, you would always walk away a little smarter for spending like the 5-10 minutes reading it. And I don't think the tech world has anything that was special. There are a lot of magazines out there, but not a lot of good technical magazines. Now, I know a lot of those have moved online, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing. Why are you doing the magazine? Because I think the magazine format has value.
Right? Yeah, I agree.
We are going to do an online version of it, like a blog, kind of a news site. If you go to datadrivenmagazine.com, like we have the domain. It's just a sample site there. I'm not starting to sell clothes, right? I just picked a WordPress template. Right. Probably. So I wanted to launch this. I want to just give it a try, see how it goes. It also gives people who may be intimidated to submit for, I don't even know what are the good magazines now. Right.
Yeah.
But people who would have been, just give people a chance to write and kind of get exposed to that. Right. Because if you're going to write a book, if your goal is to write a book, and I recommend you write a magazine article or two first. Right. Because it's a bit like running. Right. Before you commit to running the marathon, hey, maybe try like a 5K first.
Exactly.
Right. If you get to the end of the 5K and say, this is the worst thing I ever did in my life, I never want to do it again, then
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
If you get to the end of it and you say, oh my God, this is the worst thing I've ever done in my life, I want to do it again, which is typically how you feel when you write a book, then that's different. Then you can kind of work up to it. And you also do a lot of work in terms of building your brand and getting your name out there and things like that, little things like that. That matters. Not to flex, but ChatGPT knows who Andy and I are, which is crazy. And it knows our writing style, which is even crazier, right? I asked it to generate an MSDN article in style of any number of people. I think Rachel's in there too, right? So it's not just me, right? The MSDN magazine was clearly one of the input variables that they had. And given OpenAI's relationship with Microsoft, that makes sense. But like if anyone has ever written in MSDN, appears to be on their radar. Now, I've asked it about myself, kind of like ego surfing, right? Google surfing. It gets some information about me wrong. Apparently, depending on the day, I either went to Stanford or Rochester Institute of Technology. I think once it even thought I got a graduate degree from MIT, which, thank you, but I didn't. But the fact that the AI thinks I'm that smart touches my heart in a very special way. Andy, I didn't ask it specific questions about you, but it is it's interesting to see how that kind of plays out. That the AI is so convinced actually that I went to those things. And if I tell it, like, no, I actually went here, like, oh, I'm sorry, I did that. Then I asked it again. So I corrected it, said I went to Fordham University, which again, kind of funny because you take the initials of Fordham University. Well, I'll let you come to that on your own. And two, when first it said I went to Stanford, then when I corrected it and I went back later, it said it said I went to RIT. So it's like at least on the right side of the country. I think it's the same. Yeah, Rochester's in New York State. So
Right,
you know,
right.
we're getting closer. We'll see.
So it's, this is a phenomenon we've talked about with some guests, and mostly with guests for shows that have not been released yet, that are coming in season 7. But this the topic of AI hallucination,
Right.
or LLM hallucination, and just one brief kind of statement about it is part of the reason it's dangerous is it sounds as convincing as when it's telling the truth. So
And it
I
doesn't
like the
know.
term
It doesn't know.
hallucination.
Like, and
It doesn't. It's doing its very best to give you an answer, and it's not malice. It's just, I think Stu mentioned it earlier. It's the AI equivalent of incompetence. I'll say it that. I think
that's a good way to put it. That's
application.
And of course, Bailey, we're not talking about you.
No, not you, Bailey. It's those other AIs.
Those other AIs. You're special. So with that, we're going to close out this live stream because I have some stuff I got to do the rest of the day. I'm sure Andy does too. And that's a cool Edna shirt.
Thank you.
And I think this is the first ever print ad Edna has ever had.
I think so. Yeah. Thank you for that.
No, you don't. Thank you. And if you're interested in buying ad space on the magazine, call us. If you're interested in writing for us, let us know. You can reach us in the comments below on whatever platform you prefer. LinkedIn, I tend to respond to faster. YouTube as well, because I so seldomly get comments on YouTube. So if you want to get my attention, put a comment on YouTube. I actually get a notification on my phone, and I'm like, holy crap! I know if someone's watching my YouTube channel.
Somebody watched.
I think I just crossed 400.
Nice.
Yeah, which is not the lavish Hollywood lifestyle or Mr. Beast lifestyle that I had anticipated, but little bit by little bit each day.
There we go.
And with that, we'll let Bailey finish the stream. And all right. So for those watching the live stream, thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Rupesh. Thank you, Stu. Thank you, Rakesh. I will run that through a translator.
I did.
You did? Is it spam or is it real?
It's spam, and I reported, and
okay.
We'll see whatever LinkedIn does with that.
Normally, people get mad when they get spam, but for me, I'm happy. Particularly, I'm happy to be considered important enough.
Right. Somebody found us.
Right. Somebody cares. Right. We hit a number. It's not personal. All right. I'm going to roll the outro, and you have a fantastic day, everyone out there.